welcome back. I'm Mike Quincy.
I'm Alex Nizick.
I'm Joe Veselak.
So thanks so much for joining us, everybody. We just want to give a heads up. The Talking Cars crew is going to be taking a bit of a summer break. So we're only planning 2 episodes in August. I know, heartache. But we'll get back to our usual weekly schedules soon. And again, we thank you very much for tuning in. And we are going to jump right into the car of the week. And that is a 2024 Subaru Impreza, not 2023. Subaru is certainly ahead of the game. And fans of Consumer Reports seem to always love Subarus, right? I mean, what's not to love? The company is consistently among the most reliable brands. Almost the entire Subaru line is recommended by Consumer Reports, and the Forester and the Outback are among the most searched cars on consumerreports.org, which brings us to the new Impreza. This is now only offered as a hatchback, so say goodbye to the sedan and the manual transmission.
Bummer.
So yes, that is kind of the way of the world, the way of the automotive world right now, and we kind of have to get used to it, unfortunately. But so back to the new Impreza, the standard engine is a 152 horsepower, 2-liter flat 4-cylinder matched to a continuously variable transmission. EPA estimates that it'll get 30 miles per gallon overall. As is the case with all the Subarus, except of course the sports car. All-wheel drive is standard. All Imprezas get Subaru's latest version of the EyeSight suite of active safety systems, which includes forward collision warning, automatic emergency braking, and lane departure warning. Blind spot warning and rear cross traffic warning are optional. And lucky for everyone out there, that is some of the options that we bought with our sport model. We also added heated seats, a moonroof, and a few other odds and ends. And with the destination, our car came to $28,253. So with that, I am going to then turn it over to Alex Nizick, who's going to give us his impressions of this new Impreza.
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, it's just nice to be able to hop into a really simple vehicle. You know, I think we, especially at the track, we're surrounded by a lot of electric vehicles and vehicles with crazy technology and all these things. So when something like the new Impreza rolls around, it's pretty refreshing. So I'll lead with that. But ultimately, this car it's effectively a bunch of tweaks, right, on top of the, or to the old Impreza, the outgoing version. Just like the new Crosstrek is to the old Crosstrek, just a bunch of kind of little refinements here and there to make the car better.
Translation, it's not a clean sheet redesign.
It's not, but I think that's okay. I'm not saying that as if it's a bad thing. You know, maybe some of these little tweaks in isolation would have all added up to be a little bit of a refresh, but they did enough of them, and I think they kind of addressed a lot of the different areas of the car and shortcomings to ultimately make it a pretty significant improvement, even if it is pretty similar to the outgoing car. But, you know, ultimately in the end, it's a little bit more refined. It's a little quieter, a little bit more comfortable. But yeah, like you said, the powertrains carry over, right? The 2-liter carries over, as does the up-level 2.5-liter. And yeah, so it's not totally different, but I do think it's a pretty nice, easy to use car, comfortable and pretty decent to drive too, just on the fact that it's pretty small, low to the ground. Yeah, so I'm definitely excited to see how it does in our testing.
Yeah, it gives us a break from SUV overload, right, Joe?
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, I like it a lot too. I like the simplicity, just something you can jump into and drive without really having to learn everything. It's basic, and a lot of the tweaks are minor, but they're an improvement on what it used to be. Because I like the Impreza. I like just that it's basic and it's actually fun to drive, and yeah, it's engaging, but it's not overwhelming with all this technology.
Mm-hmm. Right. And you know, to your guys' point, when you talk about jumping in and having an easy acclimation to say the controls, the seat heaters, for example, are just simple rocker switches. They're totally analog. You can leave them on as long as you want. It doesn't care. The car doesn't care when you turn on, turn off. It's still going to be there for you.
Right.
The way that I kind of look at controls in this Subaru are, you could toss the keys to your neighbor who wants to borrow your car, and you don't have to be over their shoulder explaining exactly how to operate stuff.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Most cars nowadays, you probably can give someone the keys and they won't be able to steal it.
Right. Right.
This car, you still still have to worry about that, right?
Or maybe they'll be able to get it started, but can they get it into gear?
Yeah,
and,
right.
Can they adjust the climate system, the radio, or whatever?
There's no power button. Maybe it shuts itself off randomly, things like that. But
that's certainly a different topic for a different day. So Joe, getting in the car, what did you think of the driving position?
So yeah, I think it fits me well. Everything for me is easy to reach, and there's enough room for me. Plenty of adjustment. In general, Subarus, I can hop in and sort everything out and be fine. Go on long trips, everything, even seat comfort. Everything works pretty well for me. The biggest thing will be going into the controls and managing those while you're driving. I noticed I use auto climate, but when you go to adjusting climate and stuff like that while you're driving, that's kind of where things get a little difficult for me. I don't know about you guys, but yeah.
Yeah, that big center screen, right? That's kind of new to the Impreza, this portrait style touchscreen that's in the center, and most of your controls are there, right? You've got volume knob, tune knob, and then a couple of buttons for temperature and things like that kind of flanking the screen, but like the large majority of the stuff is in the screen itself. And we've tested the system in prior Subarus, and it's kind of slow. It's not the most user friendly. In the climate specifically, they kind of shoved everything into menus, but different menus. Like, for example, if the passenger wanted to adjust something and the driver wanted to adjust something on their side, they kind of had to wait for the respective menu to close, and then they could open their side and make a change, things like that. They reorganized it a little bit. They consolidated some of the menus, made it a little bit easier to access some of the features, but ultimately it's still all in the touchscreen. So if you're not really comfortable with that type of thing, you'd rather have, way more physical hard buttons and stuff. Maybe look somewhere else. I think the lower trim of the Impreza and the Crosstrek, for that matter, do get a slightly different system, but it's kind of like the sour point on the controls of the car. Everything else is so easy, right?
Right.
Good steering wheel controls, clear analog gauges, and all this like great simple stuff. And then, they almost couldn't resist the urge to go to this big touchscreen on the center there to consolidate all the controls.
Yeah, because you have such easy controls that you want, like we talked about the seat heaters and everything that is like so simple, and then it's just that one piece of technology.
They're almost there.
Yeah.
Well, it's almost like Subaru wants to keep up with the Joneses with having more stuff to do in the touchscreen.
It's a way to feel
everyone else
modern.
is doing it.
Yeah,
a way to feel modern.
Right.
So in one aspect of the car that every car that's always kind of near and dear to me is the fit and finish. I thought there were a few nice surprises. There's some soft window sills, which you don't think about until you rest your elbow on a really hard sill. So it was nice to see that the soft sills in this Subaru. The upper dash is padded, nice contrasting red stitching in the seats and the door and center armrest. And this is, Alex, as you know, this is a real bummer for me whenever we come across a car without a wrap on the steering wheel. And unfortunately, our Impreza has just a plain plastic wheel, which is like, oh God.
Which is a bummer because there are 3 trim levels at this point to choose from, and we got the mid-level one. So if it were just the base,
you think at least the mid-level would get you that.
Because then my problem with that is you then have to step up to the Sport, or I'm sorry, the RS, right, to get the leather wheel and these other things, and then you're compromising suspension comfort and some other things. So it's not maybe the best packaging, but maybe they'll refine it as the years go on.
I don't know, Joe, if you have like certain hot buttons with cars that just torque you off all the time. I know for me that's one of them. But
the steering wheel.
Yeah, just the no wrap on the steering wheel. It always bugs me.
I honestly didn't notice it until you guys brought it up. So apparently I don't care.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have someone on this podcast, no idea what we're talking about. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I have no issues with fit and finish. It's pretty basic, but again, like it's doing everything pretty well. Unless you look at it and really like pick it apart with scrutiny, I think everything's it's basic, but it's good.
Yeah, all right. But it circles back again to your really good point about price point.
Yeah,
this is what you're getting for this amount of money.
I would be happy with it.
Right.
When we're thinking about maybe the world of smaller cars, and that field is shrinking, there aren't as many small cars out there. So the class as a whole we don't have as much to judge by. But my time with the Impreza certainly showed that I think it's among the better riding small cars.
It definitely is, and it has been for
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think it's also among the quieter small cars. Now, as regular viewers of this podcast and fans of Consumer Reports know, we judge these cars in a jury of people. A whole bunch of us get in and out. We don't honestly, we don't always agree on every aspect of the car, but we come up with a numerical rating, and that kind of puts together our ratings charts. So kind of that's sort of my take on the ride and the noise levels of this car, and that's two of the things definitely that stood out for me.
Yeah. The Impreza, going back to the previous generation, now it was always one of the best riding, compact cars, and I do think that's still true. Maybe a little less so. I found it to be a little bit more, just a little bit more unsettled, I guess, compared to the outgoing car, and we actually found that with the somewhat related WRX, right? Like very stiff. It felt like, to me anyway, my interpretation of it was there's a lot of wheel travel there. So sometimes on some of these larger bumps, the body would kind of end up moving around a little bit more than you expect. But those are nuances. Ultimately, I think it's really comfortable, and most people are going to be pretty pleased with it, especially compared to some of the other small cars that are out there.
Right.
And yeah, noise wise, I don't know what you thought, Joe, but yeah, like road noise and wind noise and stuff were kind of comparable. I mean, Subarus never have been the most like isolating vehicles, even at this price point, right? Like
Definitely.
The seclusion from the outside world isn't exactly top of the automotive chain there, but and some of the noise comes from the powertrain and the CVT, right?
Yeah, I was definitely when you're revving it out, you're going to get a lot of engine flaring, and that was the majority of the noise for me. In terms of road and wind noise, it's there. But yeah, it's decent suppression. It's not anything incredible, but it's tolerable. Something that, I don't know, I wouldn't expect much more from a car at this price point. So It's actually, I don't know, I think I like how the car is very simple. It does everything pretty well. It's not excellent in any category, but that's not really, that's not a big deal when you do everything well.
I think it's awesome that you brought up the price point, because that is definitely a factor here, because we're not expecting Mercedes levels of noise isolation. But you touched on the powertrain, and can we dip into that a little bit more? What did you guys think?
Yeah, well, so we rented the RS version, which they're bringing back with this generation of the Impreza, right? They used to be a trim that was offered in the past, like a little bit sportier of a version, right? So they brought that back, and we actually rented one. So that had the higher horsepower 2.5 liter, which was nice. It's still connected to a CVT. It does some like simulated shifting and things like that. But the car we bought has the smaller engine, right, with less power. And honestly, I mean, yeah, it's adequate at best, probably. But I thought it was okay. I didn't really miss, I guess, having that that extra horsepower.
Like I was saying before, I guess I find maybe I'm a little heavy on the throttle, but these cars are slower, so you tend to be tipping into it pretty heavy. Right. It has this initial surge off the line that you got to get used to. It took a while for me to get used to that. I didn't really care for it. I also prefer driving it in normal mode versus sport with simulated shifts. I found that it's just flaring too much and revving out when I didn't really care for it. If I want to go fast, I'll just, you can just drive in normal mode quicker.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's. I found that the engine really runs out of steam when you're on the highway, or you're merging on the highway, or you're pulling out to pass somebody, and you put your foot into it, and it simply howls. I mean, talk about noise and not a lot of power. I mean, I thought it was adequate.
Yeah,
it wasn't unsafe or anything.
Right.
But certainly doesn't give you this burst of power.
Yeah. So maybe if you're considering the Impreza and you want that higher horsepower and you can, spring for that, you'll be happy to have it, but don't feel like it's a necessity.
Right.
In my opinion.
And the difference isn't big enough to really, you think, pull it apart to be worth it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's not like you're going from a 4-cylinder to a 6-cylinder with, 50, 80 more horsepower or anything like that. Like it's a smaller, but it does have more torque, and it is useful to have. So,
right. And for clarification, just cruising on the highway, this powertrain is pretty calm. It's pretty low drama, actually. At least that's what I find. When it settles down to a kind of a normal speed, and you're just cruising along, it really doesn't make a whole lot of noise or draw attention to itself.
Yeah, that's a good point, because it's not happening the whole time.
Right.
And you get through that, and then you're cruising at whatever speed you're sustaining, and it's quite nice to drive. So,
and if it is happening the whole time, you've probably accidentally entered in a rally race, which Subaru is certainly known for. But anyway,
how about the fact that it's hatchback only now? I don't know if we mentioned that or not, but
I mean, well, yeah, it's funny that when I mentioned that there was no more manual transmission, I got a reaction out of it. When I mentioned that it's hatchback only, it was like, crickets.
Yeah. when they did, what was it, the STI, when they went to a hatch and you kind of got mad, or not mad, you're upset. You're like, oh, I missed the sedan. Then there's the hatch. And you're like, well, I wish they made a hatch. Then they take the hatch away and you're like, well, can we have that back? We missed that. So yeah, I'm kind of fine with either way.
Yeah.
I would like both, but
yeah, I think it's just simplifying the lineup, right? And it's more consider, the Crosstrek is a lifted version of this. The body is almost identical, right? So they're consolidating, and it's a lot easier and cheaper to build one body style, essentially, right?
Right. And but you're right, Joe. You people just want something as soon as you take it away.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, listen, this is our first impressions. Check back with consumerreports.org for more on the Impreza as we add on the miles and finish up our testing. And that will take us to our question for this podcast. We love your questions. Text 30-second videos. Send them all to talkingcars@icloud.com. That's talkingcars@icloud.com. So we got one from Chris from New York who writes, what is considered a reasonable lifespan for a modern car? Growing up, anything approaching 100,000 miles was considered to be on its last lap, yet I currently drive a 2011 Mazda CX-9 with 154,000 miles on it. Am I playing with fire thinking I can get to 200,000 miles? What mileage would you say is expected for a modern car? So awesome question, Chris. And I am definitely of that era or that generation where if a car got close to 100,000 miles, well, you didn't even get that far. Maybe 60,000 miles.
Right.
But certainly, Joe, we're looking at cars these days that 100,000 miles, it's barely breaking a sweat, right?
Yeah. So a lot of this comes down to depending on, what vehicle you're talking about, because there's vehicles of the past that go, selling used with 160,000 miles on them for a lot of money because they're known to last that long. So there's that, the reputation of, that model, the brand, everything. And a lot of it can come down to just doing your own research, getting on forums, seeing what people out there have, at what point did they have these problem areas or whatever, that when they had to do major repairs and stuff like that, to see if it's worth holding on or it's time to maybe get rid of it. But it depends, I guess. Yeah, it depends.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that the Mazda that he's talking about here, just digging even through our own reliability information, and I've heard this about these CX-9s, is they kind of have transmission issues, right? So to your point, Joe, knowing that going into it, and it's something you can look out for. So making sure not only you're doing the regular maintenance, but if there's anything you can do about a particular problem on a vehicle to kind of, help it last longer. So in this case with the transmission, maybe you're doing an extra transmission fluid change, or at least having it inspected more often than you might normally do with a vehicle. But yeah, I think it certainly depends on the vehicle itself. But, with modern cars, there's more to go wrong, first of all, right? There's more systems, there's more integration of parts and computer controlled whatever, right? There's more things to go wrong, but on the flip side, they're generally better built, and then also some of the materials going into these things are more durable. Even the metals, for example, are more rust resistant than they were in the past.
Right.
So you might see cars lasting longer in that regard, but need more maintenance because of the complicated powertrain or something like that. But two things come to mind for me. I mean, I think there's a difference between mileage. You're talking a lot about a car with a certain amount of miles here, but age is kind of a different thing. You could have a car with low miles, but it's been sitting a while, so maybe it's rusting. Maybe the rubber bushings and gaskets and what have you have dried out over time, right? So there is a difference between those two things.
A car is in. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No.
But a car is in better shape if it's driven more regularly.
Usually,
right?
Yeah,
usually driven regularly and maintained properly, right? And actually, the other thing that comes to mind for me, and whenever questions like this come up, it's always about maintenance and these things. And I think cleaning your car goes very much under the radar as it's underappreciated, because you might have a different threshold of how long a car lasts. It's not necessarily like the engine exploded or something like that. But if you have a really low tolerance for the paint looking terrible, or maybe the rubber seals around the doors aren't in great shape, things like this. If you do a good job of cleaning your car, you'll keep it rust free for longer, you'll keep it in better shape, and maybe you'll just appreciate it longer, right? So you'll be able to and willing to hang on to it longer.
Yeah, if you live in a salt state, you don't clean your car, it's not gonna last that long. I'm surprised seeing some cars that were just, you can tell that were never clean washed ever, and it's a few years and that you have rust all over.
And point of clarification, when you start talking about cleaning your car, my brain took me to you're vacuuming out the Cheerios from your kids in between the seats.
I would that too.
But I would say do that too, because then if it gets really gross on the inside, you're not even going to want to be in it, and then you're going to want to get rid of it.
Right.
So,
but no, the importance of living here in the Northeast is you do an undercarriage wash. Maybe a couple times during the winter, certainly in the spring, to get rid of all the salt and grime that we're going to find on our roads around here.
Yeah, it's almost more important than cleaning. Like when I I'd rather wash or spray down the undercarriage than even wash the outside, or at least hose everything down. It's more important getting the stuff you don't see.
Right. And we touched on maintenance, and Consumer Reports has done a number of articles about how to get your car to 200,000 miles, and one in particular story that we've published, it's very clear, 0 miles to 30,000 miles and 30,000 to 100,000 miles, and some of the maintenance items that we're talking about here, maybe people won't really know about unless they're looking at their owner's manual. For example, a timing belt. Are there? It's possible there are car buyers out here that buy a new car and don't even know what a timing belt is, don't even know that it really has to be changed, right? So that's part of getting your car to go to 200,000 miles.
Yeah, and knowing when that timing belt change is done on certain manufacturers, you might know to be like, oh, we're coming up on that, and that you're at a point where you should decide, are you going to stick with the vehicle, get rid of it, and what's more beneficial to you? And
the simple things of oil changes.
Oh yeah, can't be overstated.
Brake pads, just regular wear items to keep up on, and that will help your car last. Another little nugget that I've taken out of the article that we published is that owners of high mileage cars have often said, when something goes wrong in the car, you hear something, a funny noise, a rattle, something that isn't normal, you get it looked at right away. So in other words, don't linger, don't let your car linger with some problem. It's operating not on an optimal level, and you just keep driving it. That's only just going to get more expensive down the road, right?
Yeah, and you might be compromising a safety factor, right? Depending on what the issue is, right? Brakes, tires, these things, right? You don't want to. And actually, to that point, I think it's worth mentioning a 2011 Mazda at this point. That's old enough where safety technology's really moved on. So I understand you want to hang on to a car, and it's usually cheaper to do that and to maintain it, but just as a friendly reminder, getting into something newer does bring a lot of safety advantages, technology and body structure and these things. So. Yeah,
2011 technology versus 2023 technology. So Chris, it's a great question, and it's a question that I think a lot of people have, and not to belabor the point too much, but we have a lot of this information at consumerreports.org to help you get the most out of your car. It's a super expensive part of your life, and so we're here to try to help you get the most out of it. And that will about do it for this episode, which was produced and edited by Anatoly the Great Shumsky. My goodness, you should ask for a couple extra dimes in your paycheck this week. As always, check the show notes for more information on the vehicles and topics that we discussed. Just a reminder, please keep your questions coming to talkingcars@icloud.com. And we are taking a little bit of time off for the summer, but the usual podcast schedule will return soon. Thanks so much for tuning in.